Welcome back, everyone. Today we have none other than General Ben Hodges, person who needs no introduction to this channel. And General, we'll get right into it. I'm sure you saw the announcement, the biggest aid package since the war started. I don't know if we can call it aid since someone else is paying for it, but how are you reacting to this?
Well, obviously, I'm happy to see anytime we provide something that helps Ukraine. So that's the positive side. What's not clear to me is how fast this is going to work because it is a business transaction. At the end of the day, for the U.S., this was a deal where European countries are going to give up their Patriot, for example, or something, give to the Ukrainians, and then and then they'll buy a new replacement from the U.S. or they just buy something from the U.S. and then hand it over to the Ukrainians. I think there'll be some variations of that. I don't know how much and how fast that's going to move. The second thing, the clarity on what all was going to go was not there for me. I didn't hear as much emphasis on long range precision strike capability as I would like to have heard. Um, I I don't understand this 50 days. You got 50 days to basically, he's given the Russians 2 weeks multiple times.
Yeah.
Why now 50 days? I mean, do they really need 7 more weeks to decide if they're going to negotiate? Um, so that really was not encouraging from my side. But more than anything, what's missing is what's the strategic outcome that we're trying to accomplish? Negotiations are not that's not an end state. That's not an outcome. That's a step. And I think that the this administration is making the same mistake as the Biden administration of not clearly identifying the end state. What's our objective?
Yep. They did say it's a deal, but yeah, they could be just confused about like, oh, what if it's just negotiations? And Russia is probably going to pull the same card where they'll start negotiating and delay the deadline more and more.
Well, and part of the problem is we're seeing is the absence of a traditional national security sort of staff, advisors that have the job of cross interagency coordination, State Department, Defense Department, Commerce, all the different agencies and sub agencies that would have a role in this. And of course, that also includes um, the messaging, the strategic messaging that goes with it to explain it when they roll it out. Instead, when you have the president there who is well, just say he's not the ideal spokesman on when things that have a lot of detail like this, and so I think even the good stuff was mangled a little bit.
For sure. And what do you think made him change his mind, especially like compared to when he took office? It's a very different tone that he's taking with Russia.
Well,
Now, we
finally,
know he's. Go ahead.
finally,
Yeah.
my hope all along has been that he would um, realized that Putin had no respect, was not showing respect, that they were playing us along, and it was working. So my hope was that he would finally say, "Okay, enough of this crap," and that he would get so angry about it that he would use all the leverage and tools that he has as the president of the United States to inflict some real consequences on the Kremlin for what they were doing. And that's what I hope has finally happened here. But when he says, Putin fooled Bush, he fooled Obama, he fooled Biden, but he didn't fool me. Of course he did. I mean, either the president, can't acknowledge the fact that, because then he would say, we'd have this wonderful phone call, and then that night he would blow up a daycare center or something. I'm surprised. Nobody in the world is surprised by what the Russians are doing except him. So I think that I honestly, I hope I am wrong, but I am still skeptical that any of this is actually really going to happen yet.
Okay. Now, the second part, I don't know if you caught this. This is exactly what Zelensky was saying during that Oval Office spat that we had. He is saying Putin cannot be trusted. And I guess a few months later, the administration is realizing that.
Yeah. Well, you said it better than I did. That's exactly right. I mean, um, anybody that watches Russia closely knows that they absolutely cannot be trusted. They have no intention of actually doing real negotiations. The Kremlin has never backed down from their objectives. I mean, just the other day, Lavrov said, "Well, we can't really have negotiations unless we address the root causes of the conflict," which is Kremlin speak for uh, forever banning Ukraine from joining NATO or the EU and doing everything they can to destroy the idea of Ukraine as a separate sovereign state. That's for them. That's the root cause of why they were forced to invade Ukraine in their way of thinking.
Yeah, which is also kind of laughable, right? Because the whole argument they use is like we cannot have NATO missiles at our border. But then when Trump is sending this biggest aid package or biggest weapons package, they say, "Oh, these weapons are going to make no difference because they are nothing compared to the Russian weapons."
Yeah. So great point. The list of strategic mistakes by Putin is getting longer and longer. I mean, you know, he said he had to do this because he was worried about a threat from Ukraine or from NATO, and so as a result of what he did, Sweden and Finland are now in NATO, and the amount of NATO that touches directly on Russia's border has doubled. And with modern technology, you don't have to be in Ukraine to have weapons that can reach into Moscow. I mean, Russia already is on the border of NATO from Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland because of Kaliningrad there. So, and Romania will tell you they have a border with Russia too. It's called the Black Sea. So, the things that Putin has done, he's ruined his own economy. He's lost 1 million soldiers, and they are isolated in much of the world, and they've lost many of their best customers, oil customers in Europe. So I think that the idea that somehow what is happening now, it gives life to everything they've been saying about weapons on their border.
And also, it does make sense. Like Putin overestimated his military abilities, like Russia's military ability, and that's why the economy is suffering and all that. He didn't imagine this war would go on that long. So that kind of makes sense, at least to me. But what doesn't make sense is why would someone just tell, I guess, the president of the strongest country in the world that, hey, we'll have a peace deal, we'll have some kind of ceasefire, and then just hours after launch some of the biggest attacks, drone attacks? Like, what's the Russian mindset with doing that? Like, that doesn't make sense at all.
This is a very good question because it does seem it's on a path that he finally is going to piss off the American president so bad that the president has to do something. He can't just keep ignoring it. And so it seems to me that the Russians maybe have overplayed their hand, that they assumed that they could just kind of keep doing this, and finally enough people, particularly in the Congress. I mean, the Congress supports Ukraine, including most of the Republicans. This famous sanctions package that Senator Graham was got over 80 senators to sign. I mean, that tells me that there's still strong Republican support for Ukraine. Yeah. And so I think people like Lindsey Graham are telling the president, like, look, he's making you look foolish, and they're not doing anything. You're going to have to come down, Mr. President, and use the levers that you have. Maybe that's what's happened. And also, the president made a comment. He was kind of making a little bit of a joke yesterday, describing in the office call, and then again to that lunch, which came right afterwards, where he described a situation where he apparently told the first lady, I just had a great call with Vladimir today, and it's a great call. And she goes, really? Did you see the news? They're attacking the city of Kherson tonight. Which implied to me that, she's a supporter of Ukraine or sympathetic to Ukraine. So maybe that's some of the pressure also.
Yep, no one knows the true risk of being next to Russia than the Eastern European countries.
Very well said, exactly.
And I guess since we talked about sanctions, and you bring up the Lindsey Graham sanctions bill, Trump is doing something similar. Idea is the same. from his answers yesterday, at least, it seems like it's a separate. Lindsey Graham one is 500%. Trump is threatening 100% secondary tariffs. Maybe you could explain a little bit, because a lot of people in the audience, they hear sanctions and they just think, oh, Russia is already the most sanctioned country in the world and the war is still going on. But I know you were actually calling this before the November election when we had a interview back then, and you said the way to stop this war is to put pressure on China and India, and that's exactly what the sanctions package is going to do.
So the Graham Blumenthal Senate proposal, that was the hammer. I mean, 500% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil. So in China and India are the two biggest customers there, but they're not the only ones. I mean, wow, that would be significant, and that would cause that would put real pressure on Russia's ability to export oil and pay for this war. But the way the president did it yesterday, it was so confusing in how he talked about it, and he said 100% secondary tariffs on, somebody buys. So in other words, he just sidelined the one that was working its way through the Senate. And
Yeah.
Senator Thune, the majority leader, apparently said, we're not going forward with this. The president has another plan or whatever. So it did not seem to be a joined up effort, which is a little bit surprising between a Republican president and Republican controlled Senate, that you would, I mean, he didn't even mention the Graham thing in his conversations and his statements yesterday. He didn't even mention it. So that told me that the Graham thing got, maybe I'm wrong, but it got parked for now, and the president's version, would only happen after 50 days.
Yeah.
Like 50 days for what? I mean, why? What are we waiting for? I don't. This is the part that's most puzzling to me, and it's what causes me to remain skeptical about it. That is he really going to do anything? Because in effect, what he has done is given a green light to Putin that, hey, you got 50 days to finish doing whatever you're doing. But so basically to the end of the summer,
Yeah.
before, and then we'll do 2 more weeks or whatever.
Well, yeah, I guess that's their military mind, because I didn't even catch it that it is really vague, the deadline. Like, what's the goal at the deadline? Military is like very specific with their goals before they start anything. Hopefully, because he did say deal, so hopefully that means a peace deal, not just negotiations, but we'll see. But talking about the deadline, I don't know if you saw this report 10 days ago. Axios reported that President Trump and Putin had a call. In that call, Putin said that he's going to go for like another offensive, escalate the war heavy to try to gain more ground. Is that like, can they even escalate the war minus like all the nuclear stuff? Because I highly doubt Russia has any ability that they're holding back, all the while they have lost more than 1 million people in casualties.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I don't know what else they can do to ramp up, the war effort. They can only keep killing innocent people with their drone strikes and missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. The Great Black Sea Fleet, which has a really cool name, is not even in the picture at the moment. The Russian Air Force does not dare to fly into Ukrainian airspace. They still have not been able to interdict equipment and ammunition coming from Poland into Ukraine, which is an incredible failure by the Air Force. I don't see, any way that they're going to overwhelm in a major way Ukrainian defenders. I think we're going to keep seeing this attrition, this pushing, but for minuscule. I mean, thousands of people are getting killed for, almost nothing in terms of territorial gain. Now, it will be interesting to watch as more North Korean troops come in. Are they at such a number, and do they get employed in a way that begins to make a difference on the battlefield? We're still talking about people that are on foot or they're riding in golf carts and motorcycles and that sort of thing. So there's not like a big armored formation that's going to break through, penetrate, go all the way to the Dnipro River, and then keep going to Kyiv or encircle Kherson. These kinds of things. I am not seeing any of that sort of capability, and There's no doubt the Russians have gotten very good at using different types of drones. My Ukrainian friends tell me that they really hate the glide bombs. I mean, those things are devastating.
Yeah.
Um, but none of that is decisive. It's terrible if your house or your town is getting hit, but this is not the kind of stuff that's going to determine the outcome of the war. And I'm just not seeing that, at least not for the next year, unless something really significant externally happens one way or the other.
No, that makes sense. I guess that does also like that leads me to question, right? Like we see these Russian attacks, they're so big and they're like targeting apartment buildings specifically. Like their drone is going straight in the apartment building. Like what are they trying to achieve? Because as you just said, it's not decisive, it's not changing the war, it's just like economic pain, civilian pain.
I think it's probably a couple things. First, uh, the Russians are trying to do what we've tried to do, what the Allies tried to do, what the Germans tried to do in the Second World War and in Vietnam and in Korea, where you bomb the hell out of somebody's the other side. But strategic bombing has never been decisive. We've never. It was never bombing that caused the Germans to finally surrender. The Brits never surrendered to the German bombing, and the North Vietnamese didn't surrender because even though we were bombing the hell out of Haiphong Harbor and places like that, it just never works psychologically. And so it seems that the Russians are trying to do that. Uh, but I think also part of this is I mean, they really are trying to eliminate their Ukrainian population. I mean, I think this is a part of the genocide of getting rid of as much to make sure that Ukraine can never be a liberal, free, prosperous, democratic country.
Yeah, that's which is truly just sad. Because I've seen other reports too, where in the occupied regions, they're actually taking teenagers, kids basically, and just enrolling them in the army and stuff
Well, without
forcefully.
doubt, yeah.
Well, I guess let's shift focus a little bit to the weapons package. It is the biggest, 10 billion. I doubt it's all just air defenses and stuff, right? Do you think we are giving Ukraine offensive weapons? Because defensive weapons just mean like the war is going to get drawn out more and more.
Well, look, I personally have never really liked the sort of differentiation between offensive weapons and
Okay.
defensive weapons. No, it gets used all the time. That's not a critique of your question,
No, no,
but
for sure.
it reminded me that, and at the end of the day, if it gets weapons to Ukraine, I don't care what they call it. Okay, but Ukraine, I'm a big believer in the concept of it's better to kill the archer than to try to intercept all the arrows. So, is that offensive? If you're striking deep into Russia to hit the factory that makes Shahed drones or to hit the airfield from which Russian bombers are taking off launching Kinzhal missiles against, Ukrainian cities, is that offensive or is that defensive? Because you're trying to destroy the enemy's ability to attack your cities. So it really, effective, what we would call integrated air and missile defense is a system of systems, layers of types of capabilities that can take down whatever the threat is. You're not going to waste a Patriot on a drone.
Yeah.
So this announcement of Patriot interceptors, that's great, but that not one of those is going to be used to stop drones. So you need other capabilities, whether it's kinetic or non-kinetic or something that helps reduce the enemy's ability to launch these drones against Ukrainian cities. And of course, the best way to do it is make sure they never get launched by destroying the factory where they're made. And now the Russians are making the Shahed drones. They don't get them from
Yeah.
Iran anymore, um, or to hit the places from where everything else is being launched or taking off. So I don't know if it's helpful to say, well, this is offensive or this is defensive, but if it makes it easier for any government to provide stuff, say this is just for defense, fine, go ahead. Um, I do believe that the way you defeat mass, which is Russia's main advantage, mass, is you do that with precision by taking out headquarters, logistics, and the enemy's artillery, for example. So long-range precision weapons, like whether it's scalp or Taurus or HIMARS, the JASM, any of these things, ATACMS, they would, HIMARS that launches ATACMS, um, you can hit headquarters, you can hit logistics nodes, and that makes it very difficult then for the Russians to employ their mass. Is that offensive or defensive? For me, it's defensive because you're reducing the enemy's ability to attack. Offensive would be to support an operation into Russia, like last year, what they did last summer when they went into the Kursk Oblast. Right, that was an offensive operation. Um, at the operational level, strategically, it was defensive because you're trying to disrupt the enemy's to get the initiative away from the attacker.
And by the way, you can always critique questions. And I'm just a YouTuber. That's why we have experts like you, because audience really, it's not just your answer. Sometimes you may be asking questions that, like, it wouldn't even come to my mind. So you can always change the questions, whichever gets us the best information. And that's why I'm telling you to start a YouTube channel too. I'm certain the audience will watch it. But okay, I guess shifting focus. I don't know if you saw the New York Times article about the Kursk region since we are talking about that. Did you have a chance to see that?
I saw the headline and I thought it was a terrible article. I saw, who wrote it, and this was Russian propaganda. I mean, why in the hell would the New York Times publish that? I don't know what the purpose was, but you know, the, look, this is a reminder that the just as important as air power and sea power and land power is being able to operate in the information domain. And it seems like we are always behind. And then we get surprised, like, oh my God, the Russians did this or this, and it changes how people think about the conflict. So you got to compete there also.
No, for sure. How do you look at, like, there's always that argument, like, you want to be talking to both sides, so you have information from both sides. But then we have stuff like this where, like, almost every claim Russia made was unchallenged. So how do you balance between, like, oh, journalists should talk to both sides, but it should be, like, well balanced compared to
Well,
what this
there's
was?
a big difference between talking to both sides and giving both sides just a platform to say whatever they
Yeah.
want. Journalists should be pushing back, asking questions. Oh, wait a minute, where'd this, challenge them. And if they don't like it, okay, good. Well, you're not going to get to be in the New York Times or be on Business Basics podcast anymore. The I think it is useful to listen to what the other side says. I've recently been impressed or struck, maybe is a better word, by what some Russian mill bloggers are saying as they describe the deteriorating situation on the Russian side. I mean, they're becoming increasingly critical of the Russian government's war effort, very pessimistic. Not that they're feeling bad for Ukraine, but they're saying that we're screwing up. We Russia, we're screwing up here, and I think this is important. You have to always, you take this with a grain of salt, but it seems like when you add together these what they call mill bloggers, who were generally cheerleaders,
Yeah.
are getting very harsh in their criticism, and then you add that to the economic challenges that the Russians are having to deal with. And then if you just imagine what would the effect be if we used all of our economic leverage against Russia? I mean, the whole thing could collapse. But we haven't done that yet. I think I believe in the old adage that dictatorships or authoritarian governments are really, really strong until they're not, and
Yeah.
that their collapse generally is quick, that it's not a long, gradual decline, because the nature of this of an autocracy is you got power, everything's super centralized. They probably are not real good about listening to, criticisms or whatever, and so that they're in power until they're not. And I think I've been wrong before on this, but I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later in Russia.
I mean, we just saw that with Assad, right? That's the first one I saw where we saw it live in 9 days.
Yeah,
30 plus years of ruling and then 9 days just gone.
exactly. You know, there's a famous Hemingway novel, A Sun Also Rises, and in that you've got these characters. This is in the kind of the Depression era in the United States, and one of them asked the other guy, said, "How did you go bankrupt? I mean, you were very successful. How did you go bankrupt?" And the guy goes, "Slowly, gradually, and then suddenly."
Yeah, the fall's always quick. But okay, since we do talk about putting pressure on Russia, a Financial Times article came out this morning, so I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, where Trump apparently asked Zelensky to hit Moscow and St. Petersburg to put more pressure on Putin so he comes to a negotiating table. Now, White House has denied this, but do you think that Washington Post was also reporting that we may be giving them Tomahawk missiles, which have the range to hit Moscow and maybe St. Petersburg? Do you think that's something that may work, or is it going to be the effect that's going to have that's just going to like galvanize the Russian population behind Putin?
So I thought what was discussed was the president asked
Oh, okay.
Zelensky, "Could you hit Moscow?" Or
You're
but
correct.
who knows? You know, when you get a report about somebody else's phone calls, unless you got an official transcript, it's always going to be a little bit sketchy. Uh,
Yeah.
I think the Ukrainians have already hit Moscow a few times with drones. Okay, now these are not they have to go so far, so they're not carrying a big payload, so those are not significant. Um, I would imagine the Ukrainians would love to have the ability to hit important headquarters and factories and logistics sites, things that really contribute to the Russian war effort. To put those in reach. I mean, Kiev is getting pounded every night. Kherson is, Kharkiv. All these Ukrainian cities are getting pounded night after night after night. I think the Ukrainians have no interest in killing, hitting civilian targets, but they certainly would benefit if they could start knocking out pieces of the oil and gas infrastructure.